Hello, I'm Pastor Hilly. Thank you for joining us for Faith Lutheran Church's Adult Forum series. We're calling this episode Mass Gathering and Public Ritual. And I say we because there is a special co-host for this episode of Adult Forum. But before we get to that, a brief reminder that during this time of social distancing, there is wonderful ministry coming out of the community we call Faith Lutheran Church in Whitehall, Ohio. Ministry that includes this very podcast. If you would like to support the ministry of faith financially, please find the link labeled Giving in the description below. And now, on to the episode. Our co-host this week for Adult Forum is a dear friend of mine. He is a phenomenal pastor. He is a avid, if not, I would say rabid sports fan. He is the good Reverend Dominic Guido, pastor of Gloria Dei Lutheran Church in Crestview Hills, Kentucky. Reverend Guido, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Pastor Hilly. I'm glad to be here. I am missing the NFL draft for this. I want you to know. Cincinnati had the very first pick. Now, I haven't actually looked. I'm going to look right now. I'm on my computer, so I can do this. And I believe they did take Joe Burrow. Yes, they did. Joe Burrow, the quarterback from LSU. So now he will be a Cincinnati Bengal. I'm so sorry for him.
You know, and we can get into this later, but you know who I'm really sorry for?
Go on.
Everyone in the XFL.
That was a real shame, wasn't it?
It was.
They were doing some interesting things. It was I know this isn't a football podcast, but they were doing some very interesting things. And that's a victim of this COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic shutdown that so much of our world is dealing with.
That's very true.
And it really is a shutdown in so many ways. And I know that's some of what we're going to talk about tonight, but that's just one chief example. If you're following XFL football at all, you have a lot of the background that you need for this episode.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, but speaking of which and just life being where it is, man, how are you? How's Kentucky? The wife, the kids, how's everybody doing?
Well, it's been interesting. My wife normally works at home, and so she's used to a certain setup here in this space. I am in her office right now, not mine, because my office is at the church where I rarely go these days, in order to observe a lot of social distancing protocols. You know, I go in to film videos for our worship on Sunday mornings. I film those on Wednesdays. We also do evening prayer live from my office at 4:45 on Wednesday evenings, which leads right into Governor Beshear here in Kentucky does his press conference every day at 5. And so we do evening prayer at 4:45, leads right into the governor. People are already on Facebook to watch the governor. So there we are live on Facebook 15 minutes before, join an evening prayer with me and my music director. And after that, they can watch the governor and get all of the news in that way. So it's been a real kind of disruption of a lot of the rhythms that we had established as a family. This is her space, and we have all invaded it because normally Tony comes with me. That's my oldest. He comes with me because he has preschool at church. So he comes in the morning with me. We eat breakfast at church. Right? He goes to preschool. I pick him up. We come home. Then we go and pick up his brother from his daycare. And those are the rhythms that we had, and they're all out the window. Right. And it's been really, so it's been a really strange adjustment period. I don't know if we've even fully adjusted in over a month.
Right. And, you know, this conversation, we're kind of touching on the fact that the disruptions are really across the board, right? Our family lives are disrupted, our worship lives are disrupted, our community lives are disrupted. I mean, I'm sure you guys have a similar deal to what we have. You know, the bar and restaurants are only takeout and that sort of thing. And I will say that one of the things, especially in the Whitehall area, that it's been really encouraging to see, and across Columbus, is how much the community is coming out to support, especially things like breweries and restaurants, places that they want to be, that they want these establishments to be around after this blows over. And so, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day who works with Dairy Queen and says their sales are going through the roof, and it's all through takeout. Or, you know, we at Faith worked the fourth Tuesday of every month. We have a community meal at our church called Taco Tuesday.
Okay.
So I became really good friends with these brewery owners, because there's a brewery in Whitehall about 2.5 miles from the church. And I was talking to the owners. I was like, hey, why don't we, because I've been home brewing for about 7 years now. And I said, yeah, I was like, why don't we work together and do a beer, and you guys can brew it and, you know, give us a kickback, and we'll do a big community event. And so they named it Taco Pump because it pumped money into our Taco Tuesday thing.
Sure.
Yeah, and we had a great release and a really good relationship with those guys down at Two Tones. I was talking to the owners the other day, and they're like, yeah, the community has been really, really supportive of them. And then we were talking, they go, we've actually had a lot of people ask, hey, can you guys brew Taco Pump again? And one of the owners said that to me, and I goes, look, we are not expecting you guys to give anything off of the second batch. Like, it was a one-time deal. I appreciate the gesture, but like, we're good. And Anthony goes, look, you know, we were giving you $1.50 off of a pint. We can't sell pints in the environment. And yeah, but what we want to do is we want to give you guys a kickback of every purchase, because you all have been there for us, and we have this really good partnership.
Yeah.
So to see that happen both ways, I mean, do you see the same things in your community with the restaurants and whatnot?
Yeah, I do. There's been a real rousing support of a lot of local businesses in that same way. Members of my congregation will post, hey, this is where we got takeout tonight. There's a link to their Facebook page. Here's how you can order from there, you know, and all of those things. And you're seeing a lot of those connections, especially happening in that social space.
Yep.
Where people can network in a way that is possible these days, right? And so you'll see people sharing the ways that they're supporting those local businesses. You know, I know one of our favorite sushi places that's like right down the road from the church. You know, they don't have a robust online presence, but one of the things Jessica had made me do was go and swing by one Wednesday when I'm in and make sure that they've got like a setup for carryout, because, you know, Wednesday we're calling in, you know. Yeah. And that sort of stuff, that you find that people are taking these opportunities to invest in what they want the future of their community to look like, mm-hmm. which is, I think, what you were touching on there, and is one of the really encouraging things to see people engaging in that really creative act. And in this Easter season, you could call it a resurrection act. Right? Yeah. It really is. What does new life look like? That's what we're thinking of. What is resurrection going to look like for our community when we live again?
Yeah.
Right? And you know, we're stretching the metaphor a little, maybe, but it is very much like that, if nothing else. Right?
Yeah. You know, on Easter, kind of where I went with the gospel was, you know, when we all get together in Galilee. You know?
Sure, you're using Matthew.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, that whole idea of like, you know, okay, so, you know, it's a celebration deferred. The resurrection is not canceled, but the celebration is deferred. And man, when we get to Galilee, that's going to be a heck of a time.
Yeah.
And so I think that, yeah, I mean, that's living into, okay, what does that look like? How do we make sure we get there? And how do we make sure that we all cross that bridge and get there together?
Yeah.
You know, that's just quintessential. And so this kind of ties us into our main topic. So just kind of moving along, you know, for a while now across our country, there have been no public gatherings, no gatherings of any size. And this is definitely impacting the reality of congregations immensely. In so many different ways.
For sure.
You know, the verbiage that I've been using, and I stand by this, is that we at Faith have postponed all live events. And
Okay.
I've made, yeah, I've put that on the website. I put that on Facebook, on the letters. We are postponing live events, you know. And, you know, it goes back to that idea, you know, you can't cancel the Church of Jesus Christ.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, there's a two-tone force that we've sort of been using in our communication, right? That in all of our written communication, the stuff that people will see, we say in-person events are canceled, right? So we have been using the word canceled there, but always paired with in person, right? And talking about then what we do instead, right? So we'll be gathering virtually. This is the time, this is the place. And then when speaking about things, I'll often use the word suspended, right? Right? We've suspended that reality and are existing in a different one. Right. That's been the way that I've been teasing that out. I like your version of postponing.
Yeah. I really like suspended, because if something's suspended, you know, it's delayed, but again, it's going to return, you know? Yeah. And I don't know, at the core of everything I try to do is, I think that our responsibility is to be positive. Like, not naive. I'm not naive about anything, but it's I'm, you know, I want to be positive, and I want us all to, you know, travel together. And so, you know, here at Faith, I'm recording gospels and sermons, adult forums like this one, our Lenten series, and then we connect those via the weird interwebbing of Facebook and YouTube and constant contact emails, and that whole sort of thing happened. What's that kind of looking like for you guys?
Sure. We do a lot on our Facebook page. That's really the hub for a lot of our distribution. So for worship every Sunday, I'll record about a 30-minute worship service, right? Which begins with prayer. We read the gospel, I preach, and then we'll do the prayers of the church, and conclude with blessing. I'm fortunate to be at a congregation with a lot of really talented musicians. So my music director will record usually a hymn on organ, and she'll sing. And also I have a really talented praise team that have years of old rehearsal tracks that they remaster and we put together. And so we get to do a blended service every week with music from both our traditional hymnody and also our praise team worship songs. And we've been able to do a lot of collaboration with that. One week we did, for Easter, we did a congregational hymn project where my music director sent out a series of backing tracks of her playing the piano and one of her singing along, and invited people to record just on their phones, them singing Jesus Christ is risen today. And we recorded it, and so she was able to put all those recordings together, and we had a congregational hymn on a pre-recorded Facebook video, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And one of the things that I've really appreciated is, well, there are two. So thing one is that I am able, because of the way that we record our videos and then premiere them on Facebook, rather than trying to do them live, right? One, that lets us edit and have higher sound and video quality and all that good stuff that sort of people that care about that sort of thing, like you and me, that we like. But it also lets me be hanging out in the comment section during the video. So the video comes up and people will make a comment or ask, oh, Pastor, I missed without, and I can, that was John chapter 20, right? I can respond, or I can, give people the greeting of peace in the chat. And it's a very, very neat thing that I can get to do that's a little different. And it's been neat. And then the other thing is that this has opened up the door to a lot of collaboration. Here we are collaborating, putting together education materials in that way, but also one of our neighboring congregations, their pastor and I overlapped a little bit at seminary, sort of the opposite way that you and I did. where you were leaving as I was coming. Well, their pastor, she was coming as I was leaving.
Yeah.
And so we had a little bit of a pre-existing relationship. We knew each other from LSTC, and we were going to do Holy Week together, right? We were going to have one Maundy Thursday service at St. Luke's and one at Gloria Dei, and then we were going to do an Easter Vigil together. And so we had all these ways that we were going to work together, and that got suspended. Right? It got suspended. And so, well, how can we yet collaborate? Well, on Palm Sunday, we did Palm and Passion, and she preached on the triumphal entry. I preached on Jesus' Passion. We were able to do that together. She preached last week. Last week on Doubting Thomas.
Yep.
And I don't know what week it is because I record on Wednesdays. And so I never know what week it is anymore. Not that days have all run together because of isolation and social distancing, but also weeks now have no meaning because as far as I'm concerned, right, we've already done Easter 3 onward to Good Shepherd.
Yep.
When Easter 3 from the time of recording is in 3 days, right? So it just is but she'll come in and preach sometimes. And we were able to work together with a retired pastor from my congregation on what we called a virtual Easter Vigil, where we took the 12 Old Testament readings from the Easter Vigil, put them together with some songs that a seminary compatriot of ours had written many years ago, and we were able to put those all together and have that as a worshiping opportunity and a prayer and reflection opportunity. So yeah, we've moved in a lot of ways, into this online space where we do worship in this way. We have evening prayer live in my office. I call it evening prayer live from pastor's office on Wednesday nights before the governor's press conference. And so, that's been an interesting way that a lot of that is migrated. We do a lot by video conference.
Right.
We have youth group on Zoom, right? Our youth director puts together a youth group on Zoom. We just had a discussion about how we're going to be moving forward with our confirmation program today, right? We had that conversation on video conference. We're probably going to have confirmation on video conference as those meetings get together. We've got adult Bible studies, our prayer accountability group. They use video conference.
The way you're talking, I'm like, do you guys have essentially a functioning production office there at the church? Because I mean, you're talking about like you're sitting on top of like 20 years of master tapes from your choir.
So I'll tell you what I have a lot of people that are very interested in keeping records of what they've done.
Okay.
So my praise team, they keep all their recordings, right? Because the next time they do a song, they'll play the old rehearsal recording.
Okay, yeah.
Right? They're like, okay, this is what it sounded like last time. And then they'll record that rehearsal. Right? So they just have all those in digital form and they can remaster them.
And so do you have a volunteer who then like takes all that and does the video editing?
We have a part-time staff person.
Oh, okay.
We have a part-time staff person who's our digital media specialist. And so he does the maintenance on our website and our database and also this, right? The video portion of his job had been mostly making sure the recording of Sunday's sermon went up on Facebook, right? Because that was all that we used to put out when we were meeting normally, traditionally, what do we even say? As we were meeting formerly. Right?
Yeah.
As we were meeting in former days,
we
would put out the sermon. We didn't have a streaming license. One of the things that we did when we began to get the notice that we were going to be suspending in-person gatherings and meeting in virtual spaces was we snapped up streaming licenses for CCLI and one license and all those things that we needed broadcast licenses for. And of course, we did it really quickly. And then like 2 days after we had paid for all of this, they said, oh, we're coming out with free streaming subscriptions for everyone. So we had to like call them and get everything prorated. really, we saw where this was going, and we saw it as an investment in how we can keep connected, because now when we go back to meeting in person, we can stream the whole thing.
Right.
Now we can provide more of that to folks who are dispersed, folks who are homebound, folks who consider themselves connected with the congregation,
right,
but can't meet with us physically. Right? We've been opened up to a lot of that by the necessity of not meeting in physical space.
Yeah.
I have a member that lives in Japan.
Oh.
Right? Yeah, he was transferred for work. I believe they will be moving back at some point, right? But they're a very connected family, and he's been president of the congregation before. Just very beloved members of the community. And I guess I think I've told you, I don't know if I've told you in this recording or not, but we got the news on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right? That the governor was going to ask us not to meet. On Monday, he had said, right, from Japan, where they're obviously much closer to the epicenter of viral spread, right? Things began on that side of the world. And so he was sort of aware of these realities before we were. He said, hey, you may want to be thinking about this.
Oh, yeah.
I said, well, I don't know. We don't have a streaming license. 2 days later, I wrote him an email and said, well, you were on top of this. Because we had to adjust that quickly, to those realities and make those changes that will change the way that we look in the future. Yep. Not only are they changing our present reality, they're going to change our future reality as well. And so, as I said, my digital media specialist had primarily, in terms of putting out digital media, he had been making sure the stream of the sermon went up, and putting out my 90-second to 2-minute reflection video that I put out every Friday, right? Now, he's amazingly capable, right? He's a college student. This is what he studies, media production, right? And he has a passion for the technological stuff, and so he can handle all of this. And thank goodness he was there. Yeah. Because we were able to ramp up very quickly. Yeah. Right? And our music director had basically taught herself GarageBand in order to send practice tracks out to the choir when she had come full-time as our choir director and music director in November, right? So she had learned that. And so we found ourselves in a really kind of advantageous place where we had a lot of people with a lot of skills to be able to do this in really quick time. And that's enabled some of this, to go back to collaboration, that's enabled some of that too, right? So our friends at St. Luke's, who their pastor and I collaborate, she, as I've said, she preaches for us sometimes here as we meet virtually, right? They get to share in the worship that we have. We've had folks joining us from congregations in Southeast Indiana. Yeah, we've had former members of the congregation who've moved away joining us from Georgia, folks in Ohio. My mother joins us from Indiana every week. And we've been able to be there as people have been able to figure out what this looks like for their communities. Right. Right. And that's been a really neat collaboration that was sort of unintentional. Yeah.
Well, I was talking to a homebound member a couple of days ago, gave him a call, and I go, hey, how are you doing? How are you holding up with everything? And they go, what? I'm like, how are you doing with the, quarantine and social distance? And she started laughing, and she goes, nothing in my life's changed. Like, I can't get out either way.
Yeah.
And then she goes, but I have been getting the emails, and now I'm hearing the sermons, and I'm engaged in this totally new way. So it's like that ripple effect is so positive and so.
Oh, absolutely. One of my folks who I visit on a regular basis, well, I don't now, but I will again once we can visit people again. But she's been saying, why don't you broadcast the whole service? She's been telling me this for a better part of a year. And I say, oh, well, we don't have the license. Well, now we do.
Now you do.
You know, and she's been one of those people that's been there every week, watching with us live as we premiere the video. And what a joy to see her get to be part of the congregation.
Yeah.
Right? This congregation that she helped found in the 80s, right? And then she moved away. Now she's back.
Nice.
And now she's back with us.
Yeah.
Which is just a neat thing as well.
Yeah.
So it just, you see spots, you see pieces, and it really ties back to this idea that the church isn't canceled.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? Because the church is there.
Yeah.
The church is doing a new thing. My bishop loves to talk about that passage in Isaiah, right? Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? Here it is, right? Yeah. And it is. God is doing a new thing. Not that the things of old were of no value, right? Yeah. Not that is to be cast aside or pushed away, but something new is coming up.
Yeah.
And here we are living in the midst of that, which is disruptive.
Very.
But life-giving.
Exactly. And, you know, we can sit here and very correctly speak about the power of the gospel because, yeah, Easter was not canceled. Our celebration was deferred, but a lot of other things have been canceled. You know, yeah. I know you're an Indiana guy, born, raised in Indiana. I grew up in North Carolina in the 80s in the heart of the ACC. There was no NCAA tournament this year.
There was not. But I will say this, Indiana University did win the last basketball game that the Big Ten held this season. So now I didn't major in bracketology or anything, but I'm pretty sure that makes Indiana the Big Ten champions. I don't know how that's going to go over in Columbus, but I'm pretty sure that's science. Indiana are the Big Ten champions this year. And I will harbor no dissent.
So NCAA just kind of evaporated. The tournament just evaporated. MLS, is that even happening this year?
Well, that they played 2 rounds of MLS. FC Cincinnati was away both rounds, and they were supposed to have their home opener. Yeah. The weekend that everything shut down. Right? And so it was, again, this was an example of how fast everything moved. Yeah. Right? That we had a babysitter lined up. We were going to go to the game. She was going to come watch the boys. Right? And on Wednesday, we were like, I don't know if we want to. Right? Right. And so we sent a message to the sitter. We said, hey, we're not going to go. Based on all the guidelines, I don't know if we're comfortable attending a soccer game, with 30,000 people. Yep. We're just not going to go this weekend. And I listed the tickets. I said, well, I'll see if I can sell the tickets. Right? Well, 12 hours later, the game was called off. Yeah. Now, MLS has said they have canceled nothing. Right? Really? They have canceled nothing. They are going to try and play a full season, they say, even if they have to go till Christmas. I don't know that that'll happen. I think they'll play a shortened season if they play. Right? Major League Baseball is talking about what would it look like to play a shortened season. What if they isolated teams to just a couple of areas and played a shortened season? The NBA has put everything on weird hiatus. Yeah. Right? The NBA playoffs should have started this last week. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that's, who knows where that's at, right? Well, the NFL is having a draft right now. Right now. Yeah. Again, apologies to Joe Burrow, the newest Cincinnati Bengal. Right? But we don't know what that season will look like. I think a lot of people assume it'll look pretty normal, but I'm not sure. Because NFL training camps start up in the summer.
Oh, that's right.
Right. They things get going real early these days. with the NFL, which we normally consider, right? We think of football as a fall sport, right? But the first weekend of college football every year is in August.
That's right.
And so you're considering what does it look like when the preparation period, even if you wouldn't start games until late August or September, you have this whole preparation period, right? With college, you have kids who enroll early, and then they have summer classes, and they do summer practices, and spring football is a big deal, and you know that in Columbus, right? With the NFL, they have rookie mini camps and OTAs and all of these pieces. You have those 4 weeks of preseason games.
Right.
What does that all look like? Even if, and I don't know that I'm willing to concede at this point that it'll happen, even if you were to start on time.
Right.
And if you start, what does it look like?
Yeah.
Because those are the most mass of mass gatherings.
Exactly. And, you know, do you, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but like, do you try to pull off the NHL with an empty arena? And that's a fiscal question. I mean, because that's another economy you're shutting down.
Well, it is. And, you know, sports leagues get a lot of their money from television.
Yep.
Right? Sports leagues get a lot of their money from television, but sports franchises, now they're operating, they're leasing concession space.
Yep.
They're selling tickets. So the macro and micro economies here are fascinating.
Yeah.
Right? And then, you know, you have many more individuals, many more people impacted by those micro economies.
Yes.
You know, the folks who are selling cotton candy, the folks who are taking tickets, who are working security at the door.
Yep.
You know, you've got a lot more people who are in that sphere than are in the league sphere.
Right.
You know, those are the people that are going to be impacted by empty arenas.
Right.
You know, and just one more thing, because I want to chime in here on something that I think has been fascinating. Again, as a son of Indiana and a son of North Carolina, we both have a bit of auto racing in our blood.
Yep.
That both of the major all three of the major North American auto racing series, the IndyCar series and NASCAR, and also the sports car racing series, IMSA, have all been holding simulation races online. Yeah, so IndyCar, as a Hoosier, I'm well acquainted with the inner workings of the IndyCar series. They've been having races at tracks where they don't race anymore. So they had a race at Michigan International Speedway. IndyCars haven't run at Michigan in 20, not 20 years, but almost 20 years. I feel like that's about right. And what they've been doing that's been fascinating is they've been inviting other people to come in and race. So Dale Earnhardt Jr. finished third in the IndyCar simulation race at Michigan.
Oh, wow.
Of course, as a NASCAR driver, he's driven at Michigan way more than any of these IndyCar drivers have. That was fascinating. This weekend, IndyCar series is going to be at the Circuit of the Americas, which is a track in Austin, Texas, where Formula One also races. So Lando Norris, who drives Formula One for the McLaren Formula One team, is going to drive a simulation IndyCar for the McLaren IndyCar team in that race, in that simulation race this weekend. So that's another fascinating thing, right? These people have been able to take this athletic product, which is very simulatable, right? Right? You can simulate driving a race car much more than you can simulate playing basketball.
Yeah.
Right? The skills transfer, and you should see the simulation rigs that some of these drivers have set up. It's fascinating. That it very much replicates the cockpit of their car, but with computer monitors.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's been very, very interesting to see, because that's kind of a parallel. That's kind of a parallel to some of this stuff. Anyway, total tangent, but something that I found is fascinating as we look at this contrast.
Right. That's, wow. And we can talk about the microeconomy and the macroeconomy and all the people impacted there. And then there's the other part, kind of with our topic, mass gatherings and public ritual, right? The public ritual side of mass gatherings and what they do and mean to us as a people.
Yeah.
And I think before we kind of start peeling back the onion, it's probably a good idea to just kind of touch on the idea of American civil religion and kind of how that works. And so I sent the good Reverend some notes earlier. The armchair generic Wikipedia definition of American civil religion is a quasi-religious faith that exists within the United States with sacred symbols drawn from a national history. And I think that kind of hits it well. If you think about the touchstones of America, and we build our own kind of ethos out of this, or zeitgeist, I'd say, out of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, right? One of the things that I have spent a lot of time doing, I don't know if it's during quarantine, it isn't real quarantine, but we all use the shorthand. One of the things, I don't know if it's during quarantine but I wind up listening to a lot of audio stuff. And sometimes I'll grab from the library, one of my library apps, like one of the great courses, right? And the great courses on world scriptures actually has a lecture on the United States Constitution.
Oh.
As a secular scripture.
Okay.
Right? And it is very much, we do exegesis on the Constitution as Americans.
Yes.
In much the same way that we do exegesis on the scriptures as Christians.
Right.
I got a lot of lawyers and legal professionals in my congregation, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, because they're all much smarter than me regarding the ways that we interpret the Constitution. And but there is definitely a parallel, one with the texts that we use, but also a parallel with the stories we tell, right? Yeah. Now, and the two are sometimes synonymous, but not always, right? Within Christianity, a lot of the stories we tell come from the text that we use.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. But within American civil religion, there's a little bit more of what I would call an oral tradition, a mythologizing of the country, right? So I live right across the river from a town in Ohio named Cincinnati, right? Yeah. Now, I studied Roman history in undergrad, right? I have a history minor that is basically all Roman history classes. Right. And so I was like, oh, cool, Cincinnati. That comes from the story of Cincinnatus, who was this ancient Roman in the time of the early Republic, when there's not a lot of records, right? So again, a quasi-mythical figure to the Romans, right? That he had been consul of the city, and having done that once, he'd retired to his farm, right? But he was this great general, and the city was under threat. So they go and grab Cincinnatus, and they say, we need you to lead us, and they make him dictator, right? Which was a legal part of the Roman government and constitution, right? You could make a man dictator, and he would be in charge for 6 months, right? Or until he gave up power, right? And the story of Cincinnatus is that he comes in, does his job as dictator, and gives up power, right? He gives it up. He says, no man is bigger than the Republic, right? They would have made him king, and he gives it up and goes back to his farm. Right? I'm like, so cool, Cincinnati's named after Cincinnatus. No, it's not, right? George Washington and some of the early, what we call founding fathers of America, right, had a little fraternal brotherhood that they called the Order of the Cincinnati, or the Order Cincinnati, which is the genitive form of the name Cincinnatus. It means the Order of Cincinnatus.
Okay.
And the city in Ohio is named after them.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's named because, right, as an American, you hear the story of Washington, right, who could have been president as much as he wanted.
Yep.
And said twice was enough and retired to his farm, right?
Yep.
You see and you hear, even if you don't know Cincinnatus, right? Even if you don't know Roman history, you hear that in there. You hear that in there. And so you see the parallel myth making, right? You see the parallel myth making that goes on.
Which is borrowing hagiography, which we see.
But absolutely.
St. Patrick is Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Yes.
Luther is Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so that's an example of doing it within civil religion.
Right. And so I think that if we take the lens a couple steps back on a broader scale, I mean, if we kind of, I had a wonderful professor at Capitol who was actually a member of the congregation I serve, Dr. Andrews. And Dr. Andrews would tie that into the things in our culture to which we project the most numinosity.
All right.
So as we engage with our culture or our society, and that's always stuck in my mind for going on 20 years now. And I was reading something recently, and it said that football has, in the psyche of America, surpassed baseball as the American pastime because it highlights our love of arguing over rules in a way that no other sport does.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
and I'm like, that's very, very accurate, you know? And to not draw a one-to-one comparison, but to kind of look at things in those broader areas. The story of America from a religious perspective, we have a lot of history of migrating people from Europe and other countries or other continents who are kind of coming with those regionalisms and have to get along. And like if we use the NFL as an example, you have how many teams in the NFL who, again, like 32. Here's your denominationalism.
Oh, absolutely.
Your referees are your priests who are kind of dictating things.
And football more than baseball speaks to the American ethos of short-term definable goals.
Yeah.
Right. I have a fellow in my congregation who works with a lot of international businesses. Right. And so he always tells a story about he asks for short, medium, and long-term goals. Right. And his American companies, their long-term goals are 18 months. Right. We want to see it and achieve it, and then once we're there, we'll move on to the next thing. Very football, right? I got to get 10 yards.
Yep.
Once I get first down, we'll talk about what we're doing again. Right. Boom, 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 and defined time limits. He says, my Japanese companies give me 200-year plans.
Oh wow.
Right. So that it's a completely different ethos.
Yeah.
And football very much speaks to that. And I think why it has surpassed baseball, because nothing a crowd of baseball fans loves to do more than argue about what obscure numbers mean. Baseball folks love to dig into numbers and argue about what stats are good and if the stats are even right and what the stats say and all that business. And then don't get me started on replay reviews. Right.
Yeah.
But what football does that baseball does not is encapsulate the American, what I would almost call a soundbite ethos. Right. Football happens in definable chunks.
Yeah.
That will last a definable amount of time.
Yeah.
We can define football to death. Baseball happens.
Yeah. Baseball is the only major league sport that doesn't have a time limit.
It doesn't. It doesn't. And interestingly, when baseball was in its heyday, it did. Because the sun would go down.
And no lights.
No lights. And so, when baseball was truly the pastime of America, you knew it happened in a much more definable box. And you just accepted that there were going to be some number of games that were shortened because of darkness. there were going to be some number of games that were either written in as ties or disregarded, suspended, if you will, right? Because of darkness, right? You knew that there would be an end, right? Now, I remember, obviously as a Chicago Cubs fan, I remember the World Series of 2016 when the Cubs and the Indians were tied after 9 innings of Game 7, and then there was a rain delay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they came back and played the 10th inning that same night,
Man.
right? My dad fell asleep. This man did not get to see the Cubs win the World Series live.
Oh.
Because my mom went up after the game to their bedroom where he had been watching, because they couldn't watch together because they were just too tense. And mom went upstairs and dad asked, "Is it still in a rain delay?" And it wasn't.
Oh.
The Cubs had won the World Series, right? But right, baseball happens in this weird, where a game now will get suspended to be resumed later, right? Football, by and large, is going to take place in this definable box, right? And thanks to the structures of network television, right, they have that box down to a science.
Right.
Right. I remember, and I got this idea about football and the American soundbite ethos when my family had a German exchange student. Yasmin had come over from Germany, and I was in seminary. I must have been in seminary, and my youngest sister was in high school, and I was down at in an Indiana football game with them, and Yasmin's been around soccer her entire life, right? If she watched any sport at all, soccer is the thing in Germany, and to explain football, you just took and you broke it down. You said, "Do you see that arrow? That's where they've got to get," right? Because they have an arrow marker on the down on the chain gang chain, right? They've got to get there, and then they'll get 4 more tries to get it 10. You know, you break it down into these little chunks,
little segments,
and that even more than arguing about rules, now we can argue about tactics.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and football is condensable enough, right, into the unit of the play that you can sort of armchair your way into being a fairly decent tactician. Right? Or you can play Madden on your Xbox, PlayStation, what have you, right? And understand the difference between a cover 2 and a cover 3. Right? In a way that just didn't exist when I was younger.
Right?
That's very true. Right? That I think people have more access to, more understanding, and therefore can argue about more, and Americans really do love that.
We do. And the other part of it is it is just part of Americana, right? Sports are part of Americana. I mean, I remember very vividly growing up in the 80s, and we would be on our way back home from church, and we'd be listening to either Duke or State play on the radio. And so, like, growing up, you know, we knew as kids, we went to school during the week, church on Sunday, and listened to basketball whenever it was on the radio. And so those are almost like 3 equal channels that really kind of like water what life is like growing up. And so it makes sense that as people get older and they stay connected with those things that carry them through. And so that gets us to the question of all mass gatherings kind of being suspended. You know, people can't connect at church. They can't physically. They can't connect at the ballpark or in the stadium or whatnot. You know, where do the masses find that communal experience? Or where is the opportunity for mass consciousness to kind of connect with one another? You know? Or, yeah, let's just start with there. Where are we as a culture finding our place to plug into those communal experiences?
And that's a good question. And I think it's something that we are discovering,
Yeah,
right? That I think a lot of those things are happening in the virtual space,
yeah,
right? I talked about the fact that we at Gloria Dei have evening prayer on Wednesdays at 4:45
right,
instead of 5 o'clock,
right,
because the governor has his press conference to talk about COVID-19 coronavirus at 5 o'clock.
right.
And I wonder, because I have long played around with the idea of American political identity
Mhm.
as mirroring sports fandom, right? That I am either a fan of the red team or the blue team,
Mhm.
right? And that mattering more than any individual,
Right,
right? That the way that people interact with politicians, especially in the digital space, right? Someone who is a Democrat in my congressional district might be more likely to follow the Twitter account of someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York, right? Than they would Tom Massey, who is our congressional representative,
right,
right? Because they don't identify with him, despite
right,
the fact that he literally represents them in the
right.
United States Congress, right? But we don't really see it that way,
Mhm.
right? And so before I go too far down that rabbit hole, I want to pull back and say my original thought is, I wonder, right, if this community gathering in virtual spaces
Mhm.
runs the risk of becoming siloed in those ways.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of ideology, again, to talk about American civil religion, there really are two major sects
Yep.
in American civil religion in the way that we mythologize this country, right?
Mhm.
Whether you wear the blue vestments or the red,
Right.
right? You mythologize this country in a certain way. And I'm not here to make value judgments on any of that right now,
Right.
just to say that that's the reality,
Yeah.
right? And I wonder, as we move mass gatherings and social interactions into virtual spaces, if that might not create siloing and echo chambering, right? Because you're not forced into interaction with people by
Right.
the accident of physical location,
Mhm.
right?
And it's easy to yell into a silo when you're sitting in a room by yourself.
It is. Oh,
It's
goodness,
really
yes.
easy to be aggressive and cowardly at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, I I was very happy when I asked you that question, and the first word out of your mouth was discovering.
Well, I
Like,
think we really are.
yeah, no, and I agree, because I was like, how would I answer this question if I asked myself? And the first thing off I would have said in my head was going to be Facebook. But I think that if we limit ourselves to Facebook, then that will get us down that dark hole that you're talking about. Because
Yeah.
Facebook was like, yelling down a well and complaining that all you hear are the echoes of a mad person, right? Like that's kind of that reality that you hear what you put out,
You absolutely can. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
and algorithmically, right, that a lot of social media are designed to feed that to you
Yep,
because they thrive on advertising revenue.
that's it.
And I get it. I'm like, I understand that is the process. And again, this is a whole other rabbit hole, right? But if the quip of, if you didn't pay for it, you are the product, right? That you are being given to advertisers, right? This idea that Facebook is not making money off of you. You did not pay money to be on Facebook, right? Facebook is making money from people who buy advertising space on Facebook, and Facebook is putting that advertisement in front of you in a way that is incredibly sophisticated, and frankly, I'm not convinced entirely bad, right? Because I see ads for things I like, for things I might want to buy, right? I get lots of Kickstarters for role-playing games and board games showing up in my Facebook, and I say, great, I want to learn about that, right? Because those are things that interest me. But algorithmically, it is an example of how these things can become siloed. And so to move on, from that point, though, to talk about how we really are discovering what these things, gatherings look like, and what interaction in virtual space looks like, I think that the church really has a lot to say to that, because I have seen church be active in those spaces out of necessity in a way that we as the church weren't before. You and I have talked about all the things that Faith is doing, the things that we here at Gloria Dei are doing, the things that other congregations that we partner with are doing. I get to go to church with many of my friends, some folks who I consider mentors and pastors of mine. I get to hear them preach on a weekly basis, right? Which I could have done before, but had to go down 7 clicks in a Vimeo page to find. Now it's on Facebook. Facebook, it's where you are anyway, right? But church, and as the church, we do sort of exist in a cross-cultural space, right? I think that we would find that within our churches and within our congregations, there is a cross-section of the various siloings that we might find, right? If we're allowed to self-sort in other virtual spaces, church might be a thing that bridges some of those pieces. I say, how do we create community in this space, right? Regardless of the trappings of civil religion, right? Because that's what we're talking about here, right? That's what we're talking about is spiritual religion, Christian religion, right? Really intersects with civil religion in a very interesting space, right? And in that, there are sects of many different civil religions, or many different sects of civil religion that will come together within a sect of the Christian religion, or other religions. I can speak to the Christian religion because that's where I am, right? Right? I'm a Christian pastor in the Lutheran tradition, and so, right? I can see that. I see that happening within Lutheranism, right? That you have people who come from different perspectives on civil religion, right? Come together to worship Jesus Christ, in the same way, and have authentic community with each other in that space, in that same virtual space, which in many other ways is very much dominated by civil religion. whether that be relating to sport,
Right.
whether that be relating to politics, right? Those are the big ones in America. Those are the big ones.
I mean,
Right?
you know, the prime example in Columbus is, you know, whenever you meet, when I first got here and I would meet families, and the husband and or wife would be a Michigan fan and the partner would be an OSU fan.
I grew up in Indiana, right? It was Indiana and Purdue. Right?
Yeah, and that's the deal. But that speaks so well to the point you're making, that, you know, despite whichever sex divide us outside.
Well, and so here's a fun one, right? You've probably seen this somewhere, but this was all over the place in Indiana, and I know they make Michigan OSU ones. I think they make Cincinnati and Xavier ones, right, of these. But Kentucky and Louisville, I know they have them. But they'll have a flag or a vanity license plate, and it'll have a slash down the middle, have one logo on one side and one logo on the other side, and it says "A House Divided."
Yeah.
Which comes from American civil religion. That's Lincoln.
That is Lincoln.
Who takes it from the Bible.
Yep.
But of course, we didn't say that comes from Jesus.
No.
Who, of course, and Jesus is the one who says it, right? Yeah. That's it. I think it's in Matthew's gospel, right? Yeah. But that phrase, you'd say that to an American, and they will tell you Abraham Lincoln before they tell you Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, you know what Lincoln said that I always remember? I'm pretty sure it was Lincoln who said, "Don't trust everything you see on Facebook." I'm pretty sure that was a Lincoln quote too. I saw a meme that had it. It must be true.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Just like the one of Patrick Stewart dressed as Jean-Luc Picard that says "Use the Force, Harry." It's amazing. But one thing Lincoln did do, though, right, was that he had kind of a keen understanding of the intersection between faith and civic life, right? That someone asked him during the Civil War if he thought God was on the Union side, and his response was, "I don't know whether or not God is on our side, but I pray that I and this country are on God's side."
Oh yeah.
That's a quote attributed to him. Again, dealing with attributions a lot of times.
Right.
When you go 150 years plus back, but that's an idea, right, of the intersection of these two spheres that is very interesting, right? Because as you mythologize America, right, you have to ask yourself that question, right? You have to ask yourself that question if you're going to do it in a Christian framework, right? Where does God fit in? And I think the easy default answer is to say right, to say that America is the city on the hill, right?
Yeah.
That's a tradition going back as long as there have been colonial people in America, right?
That's it.
It goes all the way back to the Plymouth Colony, right? But Lincoln provides an interesting counterpoint to that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's true. And John Meacham down at Vanderbilt wrote an amazing book called American Gospel. And
I don't know if I know that one.
Oh, this book is great. He kind of explores how the framers of the Constitution and those founding documents made sure to frame the concept of a deity within those documents without actually explicitly imbuing it into the presidency, magistrate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because they understood that, to be a good citizen would be to believe in something.
Yes.
But they also understood from Europe that if God ordains your monarch and then your monarch is toppled, then your God has been toppled as well.
Right. Well, and that goes into disestablishment and all those other things as well.
And so if we have certain inalienable rights that have been, bestowed upon us, then that begs the question.
From whence are they bestowed?
Yep, that's
right.
It.
From whence are they bestowed? And that's very interesting. That's a very interesting question in American civil religion. And again, different sects of American civil religion are going to address that differently.
Yeah, no, very true, very true. Well, yeah, and I mean, just to give people who are listening because we've said that a few times, right? Well, depending on which side you're on, right? So to give another example, which we can just kind of give and walk away from, and some people will want to argue. I remember I think it was the Michael Lerner Cornell West conversation.
I think I know where you're going in that. I think that's right.
Yeah, and where he made the comment, or the comment was made about what is the story of America? Is it the land of milk and honey, or is it the land of Egypt where the family is taken into slavery? And depending on who's telling that story, it's either the Israelites get there and it's all milk and honey, or it's the place that we are stolen, and taken into slavery in.
Yeah.
Same continent, and people are living there, but they're telling really different stories. And part of it is we have to learn how to live together. Well,
and that is right. That is, and speaks to the danger. Speaks to the danger of isolating ourselves from one another.
Yeah.
Which, again, is a reality that we're living in.
Right.
Physical isolation.
Right.
Right. Does physical isolation pair with social isolation? Right? Mm-hmm. How do we have social interaction without physical interaction? Right? Now, that's most easily mediated in things like social media.
Yeah.
Where we know, again, you come back to the echo chamber again. So how do we push against that? How do we have cross-cultural, because they really are cross-cultural, conversations?
Right.
How do we have cross-cultural community? Right? And it's a really big question that I think we're living in the middle of.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, think about it this way. If we think about mass gatherings, right? If it's a house of worship, let's say the average person who attends a house of worship is probably a member of that faith. If it's a concert, you typically, unless it's a festival or something or your buddy's friends, your cousin's friend's band.
Typically, you like the band.
You like the band. If you go to a sporting event, there is a definitive winner. Right?
There is.
But to use the, is America Egypt or is it Cana? Neither one of those is wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so to ask a question where neither person is wrong and live in that space is a much more tense and ambiguous reality than a reality where we A, both agree, or B, there's a definitive winner.
Yeah.
And so maybe in this place where we are physically, socially distanced, there may become the ability to have conversations, to actually learn how to conversate, because there isn't that group think.
That's an interesting idea.
I mean, that could be a positive thing.
It's a really intriguing possibility.
Yeah.
It's a really exciting possibility.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this too, the ability that we've had as congregations to have relationships with members of our community, even during this time of social distance, to have relationships with other communities of faith, even during this time of social distance, that we perhaps hadn't even considered before.
Right. Or
had considered one and done before.
Right.
Right. And now we're living together in a more intentional way, even if it is out of necessity. And so I wonder what that looks like. I always get a little cynical about some of this stuff. And think that things are always just going to devolve into echo chambers, and you're right. I can get a little cynical,
right?
But I think, especially as I sit from the side of the Christian faith, right? And talking about Christian faith communities interacting, one, with the communities in which they find themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about creating the community that you want to see in the future, right? Yeah. What does that Easter community look like, right? To talk about your Easter sermon and when we all get together in Galilee, right? Like, what does that look like? Yeah. Right? That is very much a coming together, right? That's not a division. That's coming together. Yeah. Right? And again, talking about how church on Facebook, being one of the places on Facebook of all places, right? Which is so often maligned as echo chamber central, right? Yep. Yep. Church on Facebook, being a community of people where you get that intersection of different points of view. Get an intersection of people living different truths and bringing them to the Christian gospel. Right. Right. I think that there is a lot of hope there. I think there is a lot of possibility there. Yeah. Because, right? Because this church reality, this faith reality, Christian reality, whatever we want to call it, is something that persists. Yes. Right? You know, I don't know if I have a lot of hope for Joe Burrow, the newest Cincinnati Bengal, not only because, right, he's coming to Cincinnati, but I don't know if they're going to play football in Cincinnati this year. Yeah. Right? We don't know. Right. We don't know. What we know is that the Church of Jesus Christ is going to endure. Yep. Right? And so that is sort of that's a hopeful flag that you can plant and say, as we move into the future, right? As these pillars, and we spent a lot more, we're supposed to talk about sports. We spent a lot of time talking about politics, which is another pillar of social religion, for sure. It's social religion, civil religion in America, for sure. Yeah. Right? But as this tent pole, right, of one of the things that we construct our lives around as Americans, right, sports, is weakened, if not cast down. Right. Right? Here's this other thing that we as American Christians have, right, which is our faith in Jesus Christ, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of Easter, that Christ is risen, that he has gone ahead of us to Galilee, and whenever we get to Galilee, there we will find him. This week we talk about, Jesus and his disciples walking to Emmaus. Yep. Right? And they walked all this way with Jesus and had no idea he was there. Until he sits down. But guess what? He was there. Yeah. The fact that they had no idea that it was him doesn't change the fact that Jesus was with them. Exactly. Right? The fact that we're walking toward an unknown destination, and we may be wondering how God is present in the midst of it, does not change the fact that God is present in the midst of it. Exactly. Right? And so I think that that's a really hopeful piece as we live in uncertainty, but into a future that we are very much shaping right now. Right. So, but it does also beg the question of, okay, we get to Galilee, we get to Emmaus, the NFL does kick off, like society gets to a point. I from everything I'm hearing and reading, I don't think we're going to be business as usual for 16 to 18 months. But well, it depends, right? It all depends on what business as usual means, right? No, exactly, right. I've been talking on my Wednesday night evening prayer services about resurrection and life out of death, and the fact that we're dying all sorts of different deaths right now as people who are living in the midst of this, right? Who are suffering, some of us physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially,
Mhm.
right? We're dying a bunch of different deaths. And one
Right.
of the deaths that is dying is the death of whatever normal was,
Yeah, no, that's very true.
right? I don't know. Business as usual is not going to mean what it meant 5 weeks ago.
That's very true. You
No
know,
matter how long it takes to get there.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. So but I interrupted you.
No, no, you reminded me of one of my favorite Adam Duritz quotes, the singer for the Counting Crows.
Sure.
That he got asked in an interview what it was like to, one day you go to bed and the next day you wake up and you're on the Billboard chart. And he goes, imagine if you woke up tomorrow and there was no gravity. Life would be kind of cool, but it would take you a while to figure out how to live in a world with no gravity.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, you're 100% right. Like we're dying all these deaths. Like there's no gravity, right?
No.
Let's figure out how we. So what to take that very large concept and to try to put a doorway into it that's a more concrete question. So what does it look like when the doors open at churches, at arenas? I mean, if we talk, we have spent a lot of time talking about that other pillar of American civil religion being politics. What about when polls open? If it's not vote by mail, right? What does it look like in this new world when the doors open anywhere?
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that we're now, right, beginning to think about and wrestle with and really try and grab onto, right? Because, okay, we've gotten a handle on what it looks like to live in this reality of pandemic, right? Okay, we are in the midst of it. However long we're going to be in the midst of it, we're in it. And we may be more or less patient in living in it and wanting to not live in it anymore, but we understand what living in it is, right? Stage one. So stage two, now we've got to think about what does it look like to come out of here, right? Because I think we all agree that it isn't going to be like this forever. Right? So what does that look like? I think we're beginning to have those conversations. Listen, in my congregation, we're beginning to have those conversations, right? I know that sports leagues are beginning to have those conversations. They're starting to play baseball in Taiwan and South Korea. In Taiwan, they are playing baseball in front of crowds of cardboard cutouts.
Oh wow!
Yeah. They're playing in empty stadiums, but they put cardboard cutouts in the seats so the players wouldn't be like totally freaked out. In South Korea, the umpires are wearing face masks. So okay, what would it look like to do that? What would it look like to begin to have sports without mass gatherings? Right? That's a question. In March in Japan, when things were yet quite bad, they had a professional sumo tournament. It's the national sport of Japan. They had it in an empty arena. The only people there were the officials and the wrestlers. Press were allowed in one specific area.
Oh wow!
Right, far away from anyone competing. To do interviews, they were standing 12 feet apart. It was totally weird. Right, and they don't know if they'll have a tournament in May. They usually have them in odd numbered months, right? But if they do it, it'll probably look the same, where there's nobody in attendance, right? And sports in America are talking about what would it look like,
right,
to begin to do that, right? Big sport in big in terms of a niche sport in England specifically, but in Europe more generally, is darts, right?
Yeah.
Big spectator sport, actually, and I love it. I think it's a lot of fun to watch darts. But right now, they're doing darts competitions where the players are in their own homes with their own dartboards and streaming them, right? And so the Professional Darts Corporation in Europe is talking about, okay, this is stage one.
Mhm.
Stage two will have players together but no crowds, right? Stage three, and this is how we'll open things back up.
Mhm.
And I think in our congregations, we're going to have some of those same conversations.
Yeah.
Right? What does it look like? And especially, what does it look like with an embodied faith like Lutheran Christianity, right? In my congregation, we are following the recommendations that our bishop and the worship office and the office of the presiding bishop have given. We're fasting from the sacrament of Holy Communion right now.
Yep.
Feels real weird to fast during Easter.
Yeah.
Right? But we're doing it.
Yep.
We're doing it. Okay. What does it look like to begin to break that fast? What does it look like to begin to break that fast and to do it with consideration for the well-being of my neighbor? Right?
And that's the key question, right? Because some people, I don't mean that in any derogatory way toward any specifically ambiguous person.
The idea is out there.
Yeah. The idea is out there that, all right, well, you put it off and put it off and put it off. And then at the first gathering of the assembly, you go hog wild, which feels like one of those answers that at first is like, yeah, that's exactly what you want to do, but it doesn't address the question, how do I do it thinking about the safety of my neighbor?
Well, it's exactly what I want to do. Right. But so you're asking, right? You need to think about, right? And especially as leaders, what's important for people like pastors and congregational councils and people that are engaged in this decision-making process, right? What's important for us to do is to think about how we do this as community and with love and care for one another, right? So what does it look like to distribute the sacrament, right? What does it look like to preside over the sacrament? What does it look like to receive the sacrament in such a way as to minimize the transmission of any disease?
Exactly.
Any disease.
Right.
And yet maintain the embodied character of the sacrament.
Yeah, maintain the embodied character. Think about the well-being of the people who are in the pew next to you or 3 rows back.
Yep.
I was thinking about this the other day, predating the ELCA. If you go back to the old ALC or LCA, if this same kind of pandemic would happen, I wonder if there would be half as many of the conversations, because the idea of weekly communion is a child of the ELCA era.
Yeah, in many ways.
Yeah.
Right? I grew up, this is right, it's an artifact of, in many ways, the liturgical renewal movement.
Yep.
Right? I mean, my home congregation was founded in the 60s. And I never knew anything but weekly communion.
Okay.
Right? Because that was the wave they were riding as part of the LCA and then the ELCA.
Yep.
And so I never knew anything but weekly communion. I grew up with "Our Father in Heaven, hallowed be your name." That, right? Like, so I always have kind of a weird perspective on some of this stuff, but you're absolutely right. And I wonder if I should go dust off my copy of Nelson's The Lutherans in North America and see if there's anything about the 1918 flu pandemic. And I just wonder, because that's probably the closest analog, right? And I mean, it's not a perfect one,
Right.
And everyone, of course, is running around posting that quote from Luther about the plague um,
Oh, man.
online, right? I will ask God to protect us, and then I will purify the air. And I was like, yes, okay, yes, Luther is being Luther.
Yeah.
But right, I wonder if there is any consideration there, given in the 1918 flu pandemic, with the similarities that it poses. I don't know.
Right. But again, I mean, you go back to that time, and if you're talking about a really small rural church, if there was a circuit pastor,
Oh yeah,
then it might have been an entire quarter. It might have been 3 months until that person came by.
Yeah.
And so that could have come and gone.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And it wouldn't have. I remember, I'm trying to remember if it was an old ALC pastor, an old LCA pastor, who told me that when they graduated seminary and they were on their first call, it must have been LCA. It doesn't, yeah, it must have been. He said that it was the tradition in his synod that the only time he communed was at conference pastors, because the idea was that you take communion from a pastor.
Sure.
So this whole idea of like, I'm going to commune the assisting minister and then they're going to commune me was like not even on the table.
Huh.
And so, so the pastor would commune everybody, and then once a month they would all get together with the conference pastors and they would celebrate the Eucharist together.
Huh.
Oh.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, but then with the liturgical renewal, and the crazy thing was, if you go back and look at congregational notes through the 78, like 78 through 88, so many congregations fought like the Dickens for the idea of institutionalizing communion every week.
Sure.
Yeah, and for all of the arguments that are made on both sides of that. So yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating time to be part of the never-ending Church of our Lord.
Oh, it absolutely is, and because I think we really are living in the midst of God doing a new thing.
Yeah.
Right. At the risk of being someone whose bishop is constantly quoting from Isaiah 43, it's happening. Like here it is. It springs forth, and that is a very Easter message. That this is happening, and how will we respond?
Right.
How will we engage? How will we live in this new reality that God is creating in our midst?
Right. And we started off kind of talking about restaurants and things in our communities, right? And I made the comment that it's really wonderful reality to see people patronizing the restaurants and whatnot that they want to make sure are around as this new normal kind of rolls out, right? And I'd say that it's equally, it's more so. It is more inspiring to see the community of the faithful live into that faith as we're rolling out these virtual spaces. More specifically, I mean, you and I off camera kind of talked about the spiritual discipline of giving, and that people are like, no, we are invested in this, because again, the church is not canceled.
No.
And to have people invested to say like, we are in this boat and we want to see where this boat is going, because the flag on this boat is the cross of Christ, and this is the boat we are in.
Yeah. Very much. I mean, the church as arc image, right, is one that goes all the way back to the early Christian church.
Yeah.
That it really is in the midst of the deluge and the storm and the flood and and all of those things, all of that uncertainty, right? The flood image is an image of chaos, right? And surrounded by all that chaos, the church has long been imaged and imagined as the ark that carries us through.
Yep.
Right. And, just to spin it around, right, I saw someone post a screenshot of a post as a meme kind of on Facebook the other day. Every day I'm going to just start sending a dove out my window. And whenever it comes back with a roll of toilet paper, I'll know that quarantine is over. Right. But that is, again, that's an example of understanding our situation.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis our faith.
Yep.
Right. And how we make meaning out of that, and how we make meaning out of these other parts of our lives as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's a contrast there. Right. There's a contrast there, because everything else can fall to pieces. Right. And the church and the gospel and the action of our Lord Jesus Christ are eternal.
Yeah.
Right? Plenty of societies have been shaped and reshaped and unmade and made and imagined and reimagined in these 2,000 years.
Yep. Right?
But Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years doing reading on Revelation and really kind of getting knuckles deep in a lot of that text. And I think that the thing people always confuse when they're reading Revelation, they as we read linearly, words in a line, there's the conception that all these things, all these images that John the seer is reporting to us are all happening sequentially. So they get us to a point, which is just not accurate. Like if you pick a time signature.
Yeah.
And secondly, and I think it was Ray Pickett who told me this, he said, the whole thing about Revelation is it's an example of everything you don't have to worry about.
It sounds like Pickett. I don't remember that, but it sounds like him.
Yeah, he goes, the whole point of it is that John the Seer is walking around and he's seeing these floods and fires and earthquakes, and he knows that he has been, redeemed by the risen Christ, and that as the world fades away, John has nothing to worry about. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, absolutely right. Oh, Revelation, overarchingly, is a message of hope.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? And it is written to people in the midst of suffering, persecution, all these sort of things, all these realities that Christians are experiencing in this sort of Julio-Claudian world that they're living in.
Yep.
And the point is that those things are not the eternal things.
Exactly.
Right? And it's fascinating to look at the impact of social location. Look at the impact of social location on how we read something like Revelation. Right? Which is why understanding context and why I think historical criticism is a really good method for looking at some of these texts.
Yeah.
Right? Because the message is mediated in a little bit through that context. Right. It's an eternal message mediated through a temporal context.
Yep.
And how that then speaks to us in this temporal context is a fascinating thing for me, right? Obviously I stake my life on it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that that's something we need to be really conscious of. It's something that we ought to be conscious of, and it's something that really harbors at the intersection of some of these things that we've been talking about tonight, right? You have this intersection of an eternal reality, the gospel of Jesus Christ, with a temporal context, whether that's Julio-Claudian persecution, right? Whether that's viral pandemic,
Yep.
whatever it is.
Canceling of the XFL.
Right. Rest in peace, second XFL. You were much better than the first.
That's true.
Much better than the first. But right, that when those two things come together, right, we see one, contrast, right? We've visited that plenty of times.
Yeah.
And two, then how they inform one another.
Yep.
Right? How they inform one another, and how the cancellation, right, of the FC Cincinnati home opener, right? Hopeful rescheduling, but who knows, right? And that they just issued a statement today, I think it was, saying, listen, we think we'll manage to play a full schedule, but if not, I have season tickets. So they're like, you'll have options,
Yeah.
right? Whether you want extra tickets to games that we do play, or credit for next year's tickets, or whatever it is, right? Like, however we put that together, right? That's a changing reality.
Yeah.
That's a changing reality. The gospel is an unchanging reality.
Right.
And yet we experience that unchanging reality in the midst of this changing one.
Mm.
This immutable good news, right? Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. In the midst of stay-at-home orders that get changed day by day.
Yep.
Right? When will we loosen restrictions? Here are some guidelines, but we don't know when we'll hit them.
Right.
Right? Schools not meeting in person for the rest of the year. Hopefully we'll start on time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I had a kid who's supposed to start kindergarten in the fall.
Oh, wow.
Right? What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do? Right? Like, I can imagine what it's like to go to school for 3/4 of a year,
Mm-hmm.
and then have to do non-traditional instruction for the last quarter.
Yeah.
Right? I can imagine what it's like to be in the 4th grade and come back for the 5th grade and start the year off doing non-traditional instruction. I can imagine what that's like. I can imagine what it's like as a college student.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that's like as a kindergartner.
No.
Right? I can't even imagine. Maybe I'll find out. I don't know. Right? But that's it. There's so much that we don't know about.
Right.
Right? And we hold on to that which is eternal.
Right.
And then work out how we mediate that.
Yeah. But I think this is kind of drawn to a close, but I think that the point that you're really underlining dovetails so well with the gospel reading for this Sunday, right? Because my hope for people would be when public gatherings start again, when we make it to Galilee, when we finally arrive at Emmaus and, Christ is there. My hope would be that, people are reminded and take a second to remember that Christ is actually with us this whole path.
Yeah.
Jesus isn't waiting for us in Emmaus. Jesus is walking with us the entire way. I think that would, that's kind of my message of hope as I try to nudge people politely, to the gospel.
Yeah.
To say, yeah, man, when we meet in Mass, yep, the sacrament will be there. When we meet in Mass, there will be, 2 or 3 are gathered and worship will happen. However, that eternal reality is still just as true as it ever was.
Yeah.
Hippolytus wrote it. I always use Hippolytus as a proper preface on Good Thursday, the crushed hell underfoot line.
Yeah.
Hell has been crushed underfoot. Christ is walking with us, you know, and that's, I think that's my continual prayer through this season of social distancing, that we are reminded and held.
And yeah, and the thing that I always come back to, right? I love the image that Christ walks with us, right? This Road to Emmaus story has been one of my favorites since I was really introduced to it when I was in college, by a Roman Catholic theologian who happened to be doing like a theologian in residence program at the Lutheran Church and Lutheran Campus Ministry there in Bloomington. His name is James Allison. He's a brilliant theologian. I have like 4 of his books. But right, he points out to us, one, no one knows where Emmaus is. He goes, if we knew where Emmaus, he's Catholic. He goes, if we knew where Emmaus was, there would be 10 different Catholic shrines in that town, and there are none. So we must not know where it is. And then, right, one of the disciples in that story goes unnamed, right? So the way I've always said it is Jesus is on the road to anywhere with anyone. And so, right, whatever it is, wherever the Emmaus is that we're headed, right, whoever we are, there's Jesus with us. And I think the thing that I've really grabbed onto in this Easter season, right, is the idea that Jesus is both with us and ahead of us.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus is both with us and ahead of us. Jesus has gone ahead of us so that he might walk with us, which is good news for me, again, because I feel like very much that I am walking to an unknown Emmaus, right? That was a lot of what I spent time with in this sermon this week, as I was preparing that, thinking about the fact that really no one knows where this place is. And I feel like we're moving to an unknown, and we've been talking about this the whole time, right? How will church look? How will our communities look in the future? How will life look in the future? What will normal be? These are all open questions. Right? We are discovering those things, right? The good news is not only is Jesus walking with us as we discover them, we will find him there in Galilee when we arrive. To totally mix the 2 metaphors, right? But both are true, right? Both are true. You have these two resurrection appearances, right? The one in Matthew, the one in Luke. That show us these 2 truths of what we're living right now. Not only has Christ gone ahead of us, but Christ is going to where he already is with us. That's what I got.
That'll preach, man. That'll preach.
I think so.
Well, Reverend Guido, thank you so much for your time. It is always a joy and a privilege. You and I, we got a couple miles and a couple years together.
We've been around the block once or twice, Pastor Haley.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time and this conversation. And you know, when we get there, we'll have to do this again.
Absolutely. Anytime, you just let me know. We'll set it up.
Will do. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thank you.
Thanks.